So some of you with really good memories may remember this young man and his wife. This is really going to test you. It was 2015. His name was Dave Blackburn. He was a pastor of a church in Indiana. He was gone for I don't remember where he was at the time. He came home, and his young wife, pregnant with their first child, had been murdered. He walked in and found his own wife, an unborn child, dead, shot repeatedly. And police investigation went on. Nobody could figure out who had done it. There were very little evidence to suggest who had done it. And then one day, one of the major news programs ran a little clip about this and suggested that there was some sneaky evidence that maybe he did it. Maybe he killed his own wife and unborn child. And so they just put this out there, and you know what happens on the internet. Internet trolls came out from under every bridge, and they're like, oh yeah, I bet he did. And then they started putting out all these other stories about how this young man colluded with murderers to kill his own wife for whatever purpose he had as a young pastor. And so here he's already been cleared by the police. Didn't matter. Didn't stop all the horrible gossip from going over the internet. Can you imagine that? You're grieving. By the way, a few weeks after that news article, they found the guy who actually did it. There were 3 of them. They found him, arrested him, they confessed. Can you imagine that? You're grieving the death of your wife and unborn child as a young pastor, a young person. And all of a sudden you have to fight with all of these people who are accusing you of being a part of killing her? Can you imagine the pain? This is the ridiculous world that we live in right now. We live in a ridiculous world when it comes to gossip. Any little person or any person with a computer living in their mama's basement can go online right now to all different places and post all kinds of theories about everybody around them. And you don't know who's doing it, and you can't track them down, and there's no way to confront them in many, many cases. And lives are being destroyed by this stuff. They're being destroyed by this stuff. I can't even imagine what that guy lived through. I can't even imagine what he had to live through. This is the world that we live in, though. And so I started last week, and I told you last week, you are powerful. Now, you may not believe you're powerful. If I asked you, are you a powerful person? You'd be like, no. I'm not a powerful person. I just have my little corner of the woods that I live in, and that's all I do. But the truth is, the Bible teaches you are very, very powerful because you have words, and words have incredible power. You have the power to make people feel better or make them feel worse. You have that power. You have the power to build people up or tear them down. You have that power. You have the power to relieve people's stress or to make them feel even more stressed. You have that power. So we're in this series called Sticks and Stones, and we're talking about the power of words, and I want to show you how to put an end to something that is destructively powerful. Gossip. So I want to ask you to open your program. You have these notes inside. I want to ask you to get them out. Welcome to those of you, of course, who are watching online. Thanks so much for tuning in. You've got our notes right there, wherever you're watching, especially thanks to the person who wrote this last week from Minnesota. Love to hear the stories of people who are watching online, so thank you for that. So let's jump right into this. I only have 2 things to say about this. The very first thing is we've got to learn to change our view of gossip. This is where we have to start. This is where we have to start. We have to change our view of gossip. There was a sociologist who said, based on his research, about 60% of our conversations between adults are about somebody who's not present. Does that surprise you? 60%. 60% of our conversations, we're talking about somebody who isn't with us. And the vast majority of them, we're not saying nice things. 60%. So let's talk about what gossip actually is. So gossip, I love this definition from Rick Warren. Many of you have heard me teach about this before. You know this. It's when we're talking about a situation with somebody who's neither part of the problem nor part of the solution, then we are probably gossiping. That is the filter. When I read that years ago, it just stuck in my mind. And so now my filter in my mind is when I'm tempted to say something, are they part of the problem? Nope. Are they part of the solution? Nope. Then I'm not going to say it. Isn't that an easy filter to use? If I'm talking to somebody and they're not part of the problem or the solution, I'm probably gossiping. Now, gossip has a couple of components to it. It's first off, when we share something that's not true, or hearsay. Hearsay, you know what that is? You hear it and you say it. So, were you in the room when that took place? No. Did you see it with your own eyes? No. Did you hear it with your own ears? No. Then it's hearsay. And you're gossiping. You're just passing along. Okay? That's gossip. And then the other part of gossip is when you break confidentiality. If someone says, hey, Brian, I just want to tell you this. I really going through this last night, and here's what I did. And you turn around and share it with somebody else. You've broken their confidence, and you've gossiped. So those are the elements of gossip. God can't stand gossip. Matter of fact, in Romans chapter 1, he's listing all of these things that are bad, like murder. How many of you think murder is really bad, right? We're all like, yeah, murder's a bad thing. Don't murder people. And right after it, a few words later, he says gossip. God lists gossip in a list with murder. It's a serious deal to God. Why? Because of what it does. First thing is gossip hurts people. Whenever there's gossip, it hurts somebody. The worst gossip story I have ever heard in my life, true story of this young girl, 2007, her name is Chelsea. She was attending Vanderbilt University in 2007. In the spring of 2007, she was raped. And she was devastated. She withdrew from college for a while. She got some help. Eventually, she felt the panic attacks subsided enough where she was able to start attending school again. One day after classes, a friend pulled her aside and said, Chelsea, they're talking about you. And she opened up a website, and there are all kinds of websites for this, where you can just post gossip. So there's a college students gossip page where you can just post anonymously anything you want. And it's had her full name, Chelsea got what she deserved. That was the title of the post. And they talked about the rape and talked about how she deserved it because everybody thinks she's this, but she's really this. And here's this young girl reading all of these comments, and of course everyone's replying, and because they don't know this anonymous troll who lives in his mama's basement and, has no life at all, you can't confront him, they just believe it. Can you imagine how much she wanted to die? I mean, you're talking about trauma on top of trauma. And this time, the trauma is caused only by words, right? Your words are so powerful, and we underestimate the power of these all the time. We know that when people suffer through horrific examples of gossip, it damages their self-esteem, lower sense of security, depression, and suicidal thoughts. Some of you know that firsthand because you have been the subject of somebody's gossip. You've been gossiped about. You know how much this hurts. God, again, in the Bible says this, dishonest people use gossip to destroy. That's what they use it for. It's about destroying people. How many of you think God's plan for your future is to destroy people? Does that sound consistent with the God you know? God's like, he hates this because it is so destructive in people's lives. The second reason he hates it is because it always creates conflict. Gossip creates conflict. I read a sad story, too, about a man who was a drug dealer. He was a drug dealer. As a young man, he had a terrible home life, turned to a life of crime and drugs, and then one day, somebody told him about Jesus, and that God loved him just as he was, and what Jesus had done for him. And this young man became a follower of Jesus Christ. His life was so changed, he quit selling drugs, he got a steady job, started working, and then he wanted to tell everybody else. So then he started putting himself through Bible school, working full-time in order to be a pastor. He was so excited about God, so excited about life, and then one day after class in the Christian Bible school, one of his classmates came up and asked me if I was selling heroin. He said the problem was his question was less of a question and more of a declaration that I was selling heroin. In his tone, I felt like I was already guilty and I needed to be proven innocent. He said, I tried as calmly as I could to ask him, where did you hear this? He told me that another class member had told him, but she was too afraid to confront him. So she just told other people. So he was so heartbroken by this that he contacted one of the leaders of the college. They started tracking it all down. He said, here's what we finally found out. It came from a guy, he said, I had never met, who also attended that Bible college. But he had heard a rumor about me, and he told this girl in the class during a Bible study in this Christian college, he shared it as a prayer request. Wasn't that nice? Using his name. So they finally got to the root of this. They were able to sort of clean it all up. But let me ask you this. Every time that young man passed those three people in the hallway, do you think he ever felt the same? Think he ever felt the same when he looked at them? These people who had judged and condemned him based on a rumor, gossip. You are selling heroin to afford your Christian God. It's like, can you imagine how devastating that was? Here's why it always creates conflict. If I were to ask you, what do you need to have a great relationship? You'd list some things, and one of the things you'd put in every great relationship is the word trust, right? If you don't trust someone, think of someone in your life right now you don't trust at all. Do you have a great relationship with them? You do not. And when you find out someone has been gossiping about you, do you feel overwhelming amounts of trust toward them? Trust is shattered, right? That's why it always creates conflict. The Bible puts it this way, without wood, fire goes out. And without a gossip, conflict dies down. Some of you have a lot of conflict at your work or in your family. You've got a lot of conflict among your friends, a lot of conflict in church. And if you track it down, almost always, not always, there's somebody who's a gossip in the middle of that. Do you know that every single major church conflict I've ever been a part of, every single one can be traced back in part to a gossip who just loves to tell stories. That's why for 30 years, I've been so aggressive about dealing with gossip, because after a while I'm like, hey, if we just deal with the gossip, the conflict goes away. Let's solve the root of the problem, right? Gossip destroys what it touches. This is why God hates it so much. But the third thing is, gossip always distorts the truth. Always. And I really want you to understand this point. Gossip always distorts the truth. Here's what I need you to understand. Every single gossip that maybe it'll help if you think of somebody who is a gossipy kind of person in your life. Did anyone come to mind? You got somebody in your mind that's like, oh, this person, all they do is talk about others. Okay. Every single gossip I've ever met always distorts the truth. Now, they do it one of two ways. They either intentionally tell lies, or they just unintentionally tell lies. Unintentional. So, you know how this works. You ever seen the telephone game? You know how this works? If we started up here, and I told a story over here, and I said, let's pass that story all the way back to the back corner. Do you know how distorted the story gets by the back of the room? Do you understand that? Right? It's a telephone game. Because we hear things wrong, we make mistakes, and we don't remember. How many of you remember everything perfectly, right? How many of you couldn't find your keys this morning before you came to church, right? We forget things all the time, we make mistakes, so unintentionally, we pass the story along wrong, and things get mixed into it that aren't true. You know that's true. If we started a story here and finished it over there, it would be totally different. Because we're flawed. But then there are also other people who intentionally use gossip for other purposes. Do you understand that some gossipers use gossip to gain positions of influence? Because it's like, hey, you guys, listen to what I got to tell you. And all of a sudden, everyone's around them. They're popular. It's because they've got the latest gossip. Some people use it to tear other people down. Some people use it to get a pat on their back for their own self-esteem. Do you know any professional victims in your life? People who, they're always the victim. It's always someone else's fault. They've always been wronged, right? And so they tell story after story so that everybody goes, oh, you poor thing. Oh, poor baby, right? And they gossip about others so that everybody feels bad for them, so that they get that pat on the back. There are other motives beside honesty. And gossips always distort the truth. Now, what does Jesus think about the truth? I got to tell you this. One of the worst parts of this, one of the worst parts of gossip. Do you know what we tend to believe? What we hear first. Did you know that? Studies have shown we tend to believe what we hear first, even if later facts emerge that contradict what we heard. There's some part of us that's so sick inside that just holds on to that. It's not true, but it doesn't matter. We just keep holding on to it. You know, I've seen this firsthand. In the first church I was in Madison, in my career, in the early 90s, it was a church where they did gossip all the time. And I didn't know about it right away. I was just young and naive and doing my thing. But there with the board, we had so much conflict. And I couldn't figure out what the conflict was about. So one day, I said, we need to get some people in here to help us. So I contacted 5 pastors and church leaders in the area, and I asked them to come in and mediate with us and help me figure out what's going on. Why are we having so much conflict? So we brought all these people in. We sat down that night, I will never forget it, and we started talking about what's going on, and all of a sudden, one of these men on the board, who I really liked the guy. I'd been to his house dozens of times. I thought he liked me. Turns out he didn't like me. Not only did he not like me, he later told me he didn't think I should ever pastor a church again, ever. He just did not like me at all. And so he started listing all these gossipy things he believed about me. So one of them was, years earlier, I'd had a conflict with a guy in the church, and the guy had left the church for a little while, and then he came back, and we reconciled, and we were friends. And so he brought that guy up, and he said, I heard that you yelled at him in your office on Sunday morning when our conflict happened. I'm like, well, that didn't happen. And don't you love it when gossips say, I know it happened, or I know it's true? Really? Were you even in the building at the time? No. But you know it's true. So I'm young and I'm kind of naive. I don't know what's going on. I'm like, I'm just stunned at this. It's like, are we in middle school? You're a board member, for goodness sakes. And you've listened to all this gossip. So I just picked the phone up. Because, like I said, this guy and I, we'd reconciled. So I just called him at his home and I said, hey, somebody said something to me. They said that, when we had that conflict all those years ago, that I yelled at you in my office. Did I yell at you in my office? And I held the phone up. He said, no, you didn't yell at all. I'm sure he was totally confused. It's like 8 o'clock at night. I'm calling him out of the blue and no context. And I asked him for this. And he goes, no, you didn't yell at me at all. I said, thanks so much. Hung the phone up. And then the gossip said to me, Brian, I apologize. I'm so sorry that I listened to that gossip and spread it around the church. It was so untrue, and what I've done to you is so wrong. Please forgive me. Any of you believe that? One of the most frustrating things about dealing with gossips is, you know what they do then? Next item on the list. It's like, shouldn't you own what you just did? You were wrong and proven wrong. Here are the facts. And what happens? We believe what we heard first. Well, I'm sure it must have happened with somebody else. It's like, oh, for good. You can't win. You just can't win. It is exhausting. Exhausting. Jesus said, I say only what I have heard from the one who sent me, and he, God the Father, is completely truthful. And what you need to lock in your mind is whenever you're listening to a gossip, they are never completely truthful, ever. Either unintentionally because of the telephone game, right? Either unintentionally or intentionally, they are never, ever completely truthful. I promise you they're leaving something out. So you just need to know this. And so God hates it. I mean, just hates it. For all of these reasons and so many more I could give you. I mean, how many of you think that your future, if you follow Jesus, is that God wants you to tear others down? How many think, oh yeah, that's what he wants. That's what he wants for me. So the solution to this, obviously, is that we need to really incorporate into our life what God has to say about the power of our words when it comes to gossip. We have to follow his rules. Because the world says it's okay. The world has gossipy shows on and gossipy websites and gossipy magazines. And gossip is no big deal to the world, and it is a big deal to God. So what does it mean? First, you and I, we need to make a commitment that we are going to be gossip-free. We make a commitment that we're going to be gossip-free. In Psalm 15, the psalmist is writing and he's saying, who's going to get to go up and worship God in his sanctuary? And he has a list of people who get to go into that place. Look what he says. He said, those who refuse to gossip or harm their neighbors or speak evil of their friends, those are the people that really get a closer connection to God. By the way, if you struggle with gossip, don't be surprised if God feels really distant. because this is damaging your relationship with God. He's saying you're not going to get into that close relationship with God. And so he says, here's what we need to do. We need to refuse to gossip, and we need to refuse to speak evil about the people around us. So, 3 commitments. Number 1, I will not repeat rumors about people. So that's like foundational. Somebody tells me a story, it stops right there. It doesn't go on to anybody else unless they're part of the problem or the solution, right? If they're not a part of the problem, they're not a part of the solution, we're not repeating it. We don't tell stories about other people. Second, I'll keep private matters private. So if somebody comes to you and they share a secret with you, they know they can trust you. It's not going anywhere else. Do people really trust you? Do they know that if they tell you something that you can be trusted? Now, obviously, the 2 exceptions, as you know, if they tell you they're being abused or they tell you they're about to take their own life, those are the 2 exceptions to this rule. Then you have to tell somebody who can help, someone part of the solution. And then my newest one, brand new, I have so much to tell you about this. I will say nothing bad about anyone for 30 days. Okay, this is the big challenge, okay? Now, let me show you where I got it. If you know me, you know one of my favorite books is How to Win Friends and Influence People. One of the best books I've ever read. Read it over and over again. Benjamin Franklin is quoted in there. He's one of the most successful people and influential people in our nation's history. He was the peacemaker that was brought in when nobody else could make peace in a situation. They brought Benjamin Franklin in. That's how influential and successful he was. Do you know what part of what his secret was? Look at what he said. I will speak ill of no man. Nobody ever heard Benjamin Franklin say a negative thing about another human being. What would that be like? How many of you would like Benjamin Franklin as your friend, knowing he will never say a bad thing about you? Instead, look what he tried to do. Speak all the good I know of everybody. Don't you want a whole circle of friends of Ben Franklin that are going to say the good in your life and not say anything bad about you when you're not in the room, ever? How many of you are signing up like, yeah, give me that guy? So 30 days ago, or 2 weeks ago, I made this commitment. And there's some big words in there. I'll say nothing bad about anyone. Do you know who's covered by anyone? Everyone. Everyone is covered by anyone. Do you know how hard this is? Now, I was naive when I started this experiment 2 weeks ago. I thought, yeah, this won't be hard. There's a couple of, just 30 days, I'm really good at this anyway, and then all of a sudden you start doing this. If you make this commitment, you will be stunned. Remember what I told you at the beginning, about 60% of our conversations talk about other people, and most of it's not positive? You will be stunned how many times you're in conversations and other people's names are coming up and they are saying bad things about those people. And it's like, oh my goodness. And there are times that it's so tempting to just join in. I can't believe how hard this has been. 2 weeks. 2 weeks so far. I've slipped up one time. Being honest, one time. But I love this. I would love it if from this age to the day I die, if that could be said of me. Don't you want that said of you? This is what we want. We don't speak bad about people. We say what we can that's good to encourage and build them up. So make the commitment. Nothing bad about anyone for 30 days. Second, don't participate when gossip happens. Just redirect it. Redirect it. Now, flip your notes over on the back and look at it says ways to challenge gossip. I've given you 6 different ways. Some of them are really funny, like that first one. Do you know what happens to a gossip when they are telling you the story and you interrupt them and say, why are you telling me this? Do you know what happens? If that's your personality and you're a little more direct, use that one. Because they're like, they're caught. And they're like, I just want you to pray about them, or some crazy, if they're Christian, they'll say that. It's like, no, this isn't right. We don't say things like this. I'm neither part of the problem nor the solution. Don't tell me. Okay? If you're more direct, that'll be a fun one. For me, I'm not. So I use number 6. I turn it into a positive. The first time I learned this, it was almost accidental. I'd had this thought in my mind. I was working with someone at the time who was very gossipy. Couldn't stop him. Couldn't stop this person. And so then all of a sudden one day, I kind of stumbled on this one accidentally. They were telling me some gossip about somebody else that I worked with, and I really liked this other person. So I cut him off and said, you know what, I like that guy. I have never found it true what you're saying by working with him. Instead, this is what I found, and this is what I found, and this one. He kind of laughed, and the person kind of laughed and shut down, and they were done. Never gossiped to me again. I love this one. They're going to say something bad, I'm going to say something good. And pretty soon what they do is they stop saying the bad stuff to you. And I'm totally fine with that. I mean, ultimately, I'd like them to stop altogether, but the third thing is avoid the gossiper. Avoid the gossiper. This is hard for Christians, especially really nice people, but the Bible tells you to do this. Look at this. A gossip betrays a confidence, so look at what it says. Avoid. Avoid them. Avoid the people that really like to talk too much. Have you learned the truth of this sentence right here? Whoever gossips to you will gossip about you. Do you know that's true? I learned that the hard way. Matter of fact, I learned it years and years ago, and then I still kept a person in my life who was one of the worst gossips I've ever been around, and I never confronted them. To my own shame, I tell you that. I was wrong. I didn't participate when they were gossiping, but I didn't avoid them, and I didn't know the things on the back. I didn't know how to redirect them. And the day came when guess who was the object of all their gossip? And part of it was I knew that I should have said something earlier, I should have done something earlier, and I didn't. Anyone who will gossip to you will gossip about you. You can take that to the bank. You think that they won't say anything bad about you? You think that? Huh? It's just a matter of time. They are going to say something about you. It's just a matter of time. That's why the Bible says just don't put yourself in that circle. You don't need to be around them. Stay out of their circle. By the way, if some of you know that you struggle a little bit with gossips, and you're like, yeah, it's kind of the one I really struggle with. It's really hard for me. Just know that you are going to lose good people out of your life because good, healthy people won't want to be around it. They're going to listen to verses like that, and they're just going to say, nope, not my scene. So if you take all the really healthy people out of your life, guess what you get left? You damage yourself if you let this into your life. Now, the last thing I want to tell you today about gossip is this, and this is so essential. Never, 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 circle the word never, never judge anyone based on gossip. I can't say never enough. Never, 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 never judge anyone based on gossip. This is my favorite gossip story. Years and years ago, there was a London newspaper that told a story of a pastor in London. And they wrote an article and they put it in the paper. I mean, it was slander, but they put it in the paper. It was told that his wife, this pastor's wife, had been attending a certain church meeting, and the pastor went there in a rage, and he used violence, and he drug his wife from the hall, and he compelled her to go home, and they ran this whole article about it. Well, the story, when it got in the paper, the pastor read it, he's like, wow. So the next Sunday, he stood in front of his church, and he said, 4 facts about this story that was run about me last week. 4 facts. Fact number 1, he said, I never attempt to influence my wife in her views. Second, my wife didn't even attend the meeting in question. Fact number 3, I didn't go to that meeting. Fact number 4, I'm not married. Love that story. But you know what I said earlier about some people, the first thing they heard is they would believe. So then they're probably like, well, I'm sure he did it to someone. Oh, for goodness sakes. You can't win. You cannot win. That's what it's like with this. It's like, enough. Now, I wish I could have found the title to this. Years ago, I watched a documentary about how the political parties work. And it was amazing. I'm sure my jaw was open as I was watching this, because I'm like, are you kidding me? Because I knew they did not so nice stuff to each other. I didn't know how far it went. I did not know how far it went. I was stunned at the honesty of the documentary. So the first thing they started with was they went to a Democratic operative somewhere in the South. He was paid by the Democratic Party in his state. And I'll get to the Republicans in a minute, so don't think I'm picking on a party, because they both do it. So, and this guy welcomed the cameras into his living room. I'm like, man, you are really something. But he's like, yeah, this is what I get paid to do. And he gets paid well to do it. So the political party, the Democratic Party in his state, will hire him when there's a close election between a Democrat and a Republican, and his sole job is to make up stories about the Republican and get them out into social media places. Because all of a sudden, oh, I read this about that guy. Oh, I read this about that guy. I saw it here and there. It must be true, right? That's how we are. We're just like, oh, it's on the internet. It's got to be true. Got to be true. I saw it on the internet. Somebody said, listen, if you're going to believe everything on the internet, why don't you start reading your Bible on the internet, okay? So at least you're believing something really, really good. And he's good at what he does. He makes a lot of money getting citizens in his state to believe lies about the Republicans so that they vote for the Democrat. I was stunned, and then they switched to the Republican. Now the operative they worked with, he was a little slicker. He wasn't really as welcoming of the cameras, but not dishonest-ish, and doing the same thing to the Democrats in the place where he was. It was crazy. You know what that means? A huge percentage of the things you believe about the other political party are not true. They're not true. Oh, but you know they're true, right? Because you read it. Right. Were you there in the room when it happened? No. Did you hear it with your own ears, see it with your own eyes? No. It's hearsay. And here's the complex thing. You want to know why Americans are so cynical? This is happening. You're being lied to. We're being lied to. And you never know which one is the lie and which one's the truth. What are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that? Well, what the Bible says to do that is withhold judgment. You hear something about this person or that person in a world like ours where people get paid to lie. You withhold judgment every time. Look at what it says in Proverbs. In a lawsuit, the first to speak seems right until someone comes forward and cross-examines them. You ever been in a courtroom? You ever served jury duty? If you have, you know what this is like. The prosecutor goes first, he says this, and all of a sudden you're sitting there going, oh, he's guilty. He is guilty. And then the defense guy stands up and goes, well, this and this and this is like, oh, wait a second. Maybe he's innocent. If you haven't locked this into your mind yet, there are always, how many sides to every story? Always. Always, always, always. So until you've heard both sides of the story, God would say withhold judgment. Withhold judgment. You don't know. You do not know. You think you know. Oh, I know. I know they did this. I know they said this. I know that. You don't know anything. Until you've talked to both people directly, you don't know a thing. And the Bible's been saying that for over 2,000 years. The first one to speak sounds right? And it gets hooked inside of us. It's like, oh, it's got to be true. And then we hear more and we're like, oh, maybe that wasn't true. So you'd say, just save yourself from this, withhold judgment. So this is what we know about gossip. It tears people down, but love builds people up. So the truth is, if I opened it up right now, and I opened it up to the room, and I said, hey, any of you have any painful gossipy stories where somebody gossiped about you and really hurt you? Are you kidding me? Do you know how hard it would be to hear some of the stories of just of the people here or people watching online? There are people who've been so damaged by this subject. There is no verse in the Bible I can point you to that says your goal and your responsibility in life is to tear somebody down. None. Your job, according to the Bible, is to build others up, and you don't do it with gossip. So if you follow Jesus, we make these commitments. Right? Can you make these commitments? Can you sit here today and say, I sign up for all of them? A rumor hits my ears, it stops right there, it doesn't come out my mouth. No more. I'm not talking to anyone who's not part of the problem or the solution. I keep private things matter. And I really, really, really want you to try this with me for the next 30 days, because I'm going to keep going. Do not say one negative thing about anyone. I mean anyone. Everyone is covered by anyone. Trump or Pelosi. They're all covered. Trump or Biden. I mean, they're all covered. Nothing. Not a single negative word. Some of you are like, well, what am I going to say then? If you say nothing, that's going to be better than saying something bad, right? Right? Let's practice this together. Unless some of you think, I just wish there was more negativity in the world. I just wish we had more people saying bad things about others. I wish there was more of it. I just don't think we have enough. What? Let's be followers of Jesus. Let's be followers of Jesus. We're going to do what he says. You're going to find that one's a lot harder than it seems. So you read it on a screen and you start doing it. Woo! I'll pray for you all. Pray for me too. Some of you are just exploring either here or online. I just want you to know truth really matters. Some things are true. Some things are true. And the most important truth that God came to reveal is that, what Jesus came to reveal is that our God, our Father, is a being of pure love. And to be with him, we have to be just like him. And if you want to claim that you've only been perfectly loving all your life, then you're fine. But just evaluate yourself on this one topic alone. You ever told a story about someone else that wasn't kind? Did you ever speak evil of another human being? With just this one thing alone, how many offenses do you think you've had in your life? Me? Thousands and thousands. I'm not like him, because he's never done this. And so this God of perfect love did something unthinkable. He gave his only son to die on a cross. Do you know that as Jesus hung dying on the cross, he looked down through time and saw us, and he chose to take into his own body every gossipy word we've ever said. And he paid for it all in full. And paid for every unloving thing we've said or done. And then this God of love rose again, showing his true power. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish. Today, any single person who wants this amazing gift that Jesus offers can have it. You can be completely forgiven, not because of anything you do, just because of what Jesus did for you. If you want his gift of forgiveness and love and life, just cry out to him right now. Say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. I'm not perfect. I admit it to you. Far from it. But I heard that you died for me on that cross. Please forgive me. Come make your home inside of me today. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, as we finish up again, if you're here, I want to ask you all to grab the connection card out of your program. Even if you're a regular tender, just take a moment and let us know you're here. If you prayed and asked Jesus to forgive you or renewed your commitment, you can let us know here. Or maybe in the comments section, I'd love to hear how many of you are going to take the 30-day challenge. Just write 30-day challenge in this little line here so we know and we can pray for you. You can drop it in one of the two offering boxes back by the doors where you came in. If you're watching online, you can let us know too, either two ways. There's a Connect With Us tab or a I Said Yes button in the upper right-hand portion of your screen. So thanks so much for coming. We hope to see you again next week.